Welcome back to 755 Forever. I'm David O'Brien, Braves writer at The Athletic. I'm with my co-host, Eric O'Flaherty. What's happening, Eric? Former Braves reliever, Eric O'Flaherty. How you doing, man?
I'm not bad. How are you doing?
I'm down here spring training, so here we are again. Beautiful weather. I mean, perfect weather so far. Gosh. And it looks like it's going to be like this for at least the next 12 days or so. 75 for a high. A little chilly in the morning. It's nice. Sunny as hell.
There's snow in here right now. I'm looking at snow.
You went to enough of these. What was it like for you? Because I talked to Charlie Morton today. He's 40 years old. He's in here, and he's looking around the clubhouse and seeing guys like A.J. Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop, who are 22 years old. And he said, as you get older, you really start to feel older. I mean, he looks and sees these guys that look 15. He goes, I know they're not 15, but when you get older, they look 15.
Anybody under like 25 looks like a high school kid to you.
He said that, because I asked him, I said, this is what you were talking about, the thing that you missed the most and the reason you came back, right? When you come back in this clubhouse, this is the camaraderie is what you say is the best part of the game right now. And he said, yeah, if it wasn't for this clubhouse, this team, you probably feel differently. He said, but it's just, he goes, look around. He goes, just a bunch of guys that it makes you feel like you're home. And he said, you don't get that many places. And he goes, it's ridiculous when you look at the solid guys that they have here. I said, the kind of guys you'd kind of want to hang around with, huh? He goes, yeah. I mean, look around. Everybody here. I mean, he's right next to Fried and Sale, and all the starters are on one while. By the way, I think it's kind of probably a hint that they have the starters lined up. They got Charlie, Max, you got Strider, Sale, and then right there, Ronaldo Lopez is lined up on that wall with the starters. Then you got Elder, Ian Anderson. There's like 8 starters lined up there together. And then there's like 4 relievers, Matzik, Minter, some of the big relievers next to them in the space of, 12 lockers in one corner of the clubhouse. But they have Lopez over there with all the starters. So I think it's very legit that they are getting him stretched out to start. And it's not going to surprise me if they let him start to begin the season, because I think ideally they had to rush Smith-Shawver last year. They needed him, and they had to. They don't want to do that with Waldrop, even though they really love the guy and they think he's going to be ready. But I think they want them both, ideally, to go to AAA to start the season and get some starts in, so that when they do come up here, they're really comfortable and ready to do, their thing rather than trying to feel their way and learn along the way. I think if they have their druthers, they have so much bullpen depth that at least while those guys are all healthy in that bullpen, they can afford to do it. And, of course, move Lopez if they need to later, and one of those guys will be ready at that point.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, that's how it works out. It's hard, you go to camp, it's different with this team because so many spots are taken, but it's even hard not to read into where lockers are in spring training.
Yeah.
It was really easy at Disney because they had the A side and the B side. If you weren't on that A side, you're going to have to battle just to make the team. Unless
you're Andrew Jones. He was the only one that wanted his locker over there with all the minor leaguers. The wall that separated, that was the weirdest clubhouse.
Yeah.
The layout of that clubhouse was so weird. Yeah, like you said, if you were on that side, you knew you had some work to do before you were on the side over there with Chipper and Smoltz and B-Mac and all those guys.
I don't know. Spring training, it's interesting because you see so many guys come in and they're in this great shape. They've got this crazy offseason workout they do. Everybody always has a new program or a new place they trained, and barely any of it ever winds up mattering. This guy lost 30 pounds and he still throws the exact same velocity and same stuff. But every once in a while, somebody comes into camp and they're just a different animal. So that's always the most fun thing for me to watch for, is the guys that really change their body and their routine, like Kenley Jansen did his stretching and did his hip stuff, and it turned into a big deal and he had a great season.
Yeah, they don't have that layout like that, but here it's a huge clubhouse, and on one side are all the minor leaguers, prospects, all those guys. And they don't have them in there with the guys that are assured of being on the team.
It's nice having that group close, just to have the guys that are going to be together, get that chance to bond and start building it. If it was just random, I don't think you connect as much in spring training.
Yeah, I talked to A.J. Smith-Shawver today and asked him about Waldrop, and he said, yeah, that's splitters. That's pretty good, man. He watched him throw the other. Everybody that's seen him throw so far, he's doing a couple of bullpens. He got here early, which is pretty cool. He got here like a week early than he needed to be. Waldrop, he's jacked. I mean, and he had a long season last year. This guy started the season at University of Florida, pitching the College World Series, then gets drafted high in the first round. Most of those guys, they shut him down, those first-round pitchers, especially college guys, and they say, all right, go down to the facility, throw some bullpens, we'll check you out, then you can go home. They had him make 8 minor league starts. He said it was really beneficial to him. He made starts at every level. Made a AAA start at the end because the AA was shut down. But he made 1 at low A, 3 in high A, 3 in AA, and 1 in AAA. And the kid was dominant. I mean, his numbers are awesome.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to send him straight to AA and have him get hit. But I think like low A and single A is probably comparable to pretty good Division I baseball. But if you can get him through that, just make sure you can handle that level, A ball, high A. Get these guys a couple starts in AA and AAA. There's a ton of value in that.
So he had his 40-some strikeouts in 29 innings or whatever, and 1 homer allowed in 8 starts. Pretty good sign. So he comes in with a lot more confidence, I think, than kids that haven't thrown any pro ball at all. When he goes out and makes his first spring training appearance, I think he's going to be a lot better prepared than some of those guys. He's not going to feel as much butterflies. I'm sure he'll still feel some. All these guys know what's on the line, but I like the fact that they have so many guys competing for that 5th starter job, including experienced guys like Huascar Ynoa and obviously Bryce Elder, who made the damn all-star team last year. They have those guys competing for the 5th starter job. So I don't think these young kids are going to put as much pressure on themselves as they might ordinarily. They probably realistically know, unless they're just so full of confidence they think they can beat those guys out. But they probably have a pretty good idea that, you know what, it's not going to be a failure if you start the year at AAA when you got a guy that made the all-star team last year and you got another guy coming back who was on an all-star path before he foolishly punched a bench and broke his hand. Huascar Ynoa would have made the all-star team that year.
Yeah, it's hard to be rational when you're young, though. Like if there's a sliver of hope that you can make this team, I was bad about it. But when I was young, I read a lot of the papers and things being written about the team. And I thought I had the chance to make the Mariners in 2007, and they'd sign Arthur Rhodes. It was like, unless Arthur, and he did, he blew out his elbow. His elbow was blown out, and he was throwing 82 the whole spring training, and he was doing okay. Made the team, had Tommy John like the 2nd or 3rd week of the season, and I got called up. But I still believed the whole camp that I had a chance to make this team. And if I was in the stage I'm at now where I can look at it and how rosters lay out, this guy's got guaranteed money. Yeah. There's no chance I was making that team. And I'd know it now, but when you're young, it's not to a fault though. It's a good thing. Oh, yeah. You just have no clue how it's going to lay out and you haven't seen it enough to realize like most of this is already pretty set.
And you've been dominant at pretty much every level you've been. If you're here, you're only 22 years old, it means you've been dominant pretty much every level you've been. A.J. Smith-Shawver knows a lot more about it. He's more realistic, I'm sure, because he was up here for several starts last year. A couple of them he got lit up. A couple of them, after he got sent back down, he came back up and pitched well. So he knows. I mean, he's got a good idea, I think, of what it takes and whether he's ready or not. But, Walter goes out last year and pitches at every level in the minor league system and has success. And also, he pointed out, those guys are fully aware of the Braves' history. Like last year with Dylan Dodd and Schuster. When we got to spring training, nobody was talking about those guys as 5th starter candidates. Nobody. It was Ian Anderson and those guys, Soroka. That was the group that was competing for 5th starter. Then by the middle of the Grapefruit League season, those guys have been sent down. Elder had been sent down, and Dylan Dodd and Schuster were battling for the 5th starter spot.
Yeah, so, you see those stories all the time, and anything can happen. With certain guys, they're going to want a little time in AAA. But if you absolutely just blow everybody's doors off and look ready, I don't think the team's going to hesitate to take somebody that, we might not be talking about yet. It just takes a lot.
Alex said that today. He goes, we've shown, if we think the guy can come up and help us, we'll bring him. We'll make the move.
If we think someone can help us, we'll certainly make the move.
But he also pointed out those guys are really young. They're just getting started in their careers. There's no pressure on them. The Braves have got options. They've got a lot of depth this year as opposed to last year, when they really only had those kind of 2 guys competing for 5th. And Soroka, but he was still coming back from injury, and he had the setback early in spring training, the hamstring. So he wasn't ready for the opening day roster anyway. He had just started pitching. So really it was 2 guys competing for 5th starter, and they both kind of fell on their face early, and that's what allowed Dylan Dodd and Schuster, who pitched really well in their limited chances early, all of a sudden they leapfrogged both of those guys. But this year, you're looking at a different situation. You got Noah coming back from TJ's healthy. Anderson's going to be back about midseason. But you got a guy like Smith-Shawver who's pitched in the big leagues. I mean, this isn't like Dylan Dodd and Schuster. Neither one of them had pitched in the big leagues at all. You got a bunch of guys competing for it, like Winans and people like that who got a lot of starts last year. Several starts. There's a lot of guys that made several starts and know what it takes. So there's no pressure on the Braves to have to put either one of those guys on. And I don't think either of those guys are going to make the opening day roster. But I think both of them will be up by early summer, Waldrop and Smith-Shawver.
And that's what matters. I mean, even if you make the team out of spring training, it doesn't buy you anything. It gets you a look. It seems like a big deal to make the team, and it is a good step, but you still have to show up and deliver and get it done once the season starts. I think the biggest perk for a guy like Smith-Shawver is the comfort level he'll have this spring. Knows all the guys, knows he can succeed at that level. And then these games aren't going to feel like a big deal when you've already pitched in the big league games. But when you haven't tasted the real big league games yet, the spring training games feel like the big leagues. So it's a lot easier when you've tasted it.
The mood around here is really good. I mean, for a team that got unceremoniously dumped in the postseason in the LDS the last 2 years, it left a bad taste in these guys' mouths, and there is a sharp focus. Every guy's in shape. Every guy's talking confident. Every guy's talking about how deep this team is. They got everybody back on the offense. They added Kellenick. They just feel like, as Mentor said yesterday, we were the best team.
Looking back, we just obviously, we were the best team in baseball. And for us to go out like that in the first round, and it's just we hold ourselves to a high standard here.
We just didn't get it done. But that's how they feel like it is this year. But it's not a negative. It's not a pressure situation where they feel like we flamed out 2 years in a row. We cannot do it again. It's more like, let's make sure from day one, as Strider said, we do everything to put ourselves in the best position to be ready, to give ourselves the best opportunity. That's win the division. Nobody's talking about, sloughing off and getting in as a wild card and maybe not having that break. Everybody wants to have that opportunity again to figure out what to do in the break and all that. But they just want to go out and from day one, just roll teams with the depth they have.
I don't think we should be afraid to say we want to win a World Series. There's kind of this aura around it that it's something that's out of your control, and all outcomes are out of your control. But we want to leave everything out there to guarantee us the best opportunity, the best chance.
Yeah, I mean, opportunity, I think, is the key word. I probably went to camp maybe 2 times where I felt like my team had a legit chance at a World Series, and to come into camp and know you're on the best team in baseball, I mean, it's got to fire you up.
The thing you always like to see is so many guys that arrive early on a team that's loaded with veterans who already have their spots. I mean, you got guys like Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Michael Harris, these guys that are signed for 6, 7, 8 years, and they're in camp a week early. They don't have to be here till next Tuesday. They're all here hitting already. And that's, to me, is a great sign. It's one thing if you have guys entering the last year of their contracts or whatever competing for spots, but these are guys – this lineup is set. There's literally no spot open in the lineup. It's set. And all the guys are here. Most of the guys are already here. Acuna's not here, but Acuna played some winter ball. He had to make the awards circuit and all that, and he's in great shape, and they don't need him to be here right. But he'll be here, I'm sure, in the next day or two. But almost everybody's here, and they're out there raking, taking early BP, in separate field and all that. So that's a really good sign. These guys are taking it very seriously and not just kind of easing into this thing.
It's changed a lot, but I always looked at it like the guys that showed up on reporting day. It wasn't always an indicator, but there's a lot of guys, like sometimes the own program guys or guys that weren't that invested in the team would kind of show up last minute. Other guys, great teammates, would show up on that day too because they'd just been through it enough and they knew it was a long season. But it's always a good sign when the guys want to be around each other, getting there a week early, getting settled in, can't wait to, even if it's just play golf, go to dinner, hang out, that they can't wait to see their teammates again is always just a good sign for what you got going on in the clubhouse.
Man, I tell people how different it was when I first started covering baseball, how different it was back then. Because now, if guys aren't here early, it's like, why isn't he there early?
Yeah.
But reporting day is like, everybody's got to be here, next Tuesday. I tell people back in the day, that's not actually the day they have to be here. The day you have to be there is like March 1st or something. It's like nobody abuses that anymore, though. But back in the day,
guys would show up March 1, huh?
Uh-huh. I had Gary Sheffield did it a couple of times. Pedro Martinez was known to do it. They'd stay in the Dominican and come over here the day they had to be here, Guys that were established and all that, they wouldn't get here early, much less, on the reporting day, much less get here earlier than that. So that's totally changed. But then again, that was also a time when a lot of guys came in with an extra 10, 15 pounds and worked themselves into shape while they're at spring training. Nobody comes in now with an extra 10, 15 pounds. They come in looking exactly like they did when they left, if not in better shape, some of the guys.
You really can't.
Yeah, you can't.
the off season is the only time you get a chance to really do some heavier lifting and have time to recover. And, Lance Berkman's got a famous quote about that goes around the game. It's like, hey, if everybody would just stop working out, none of us would have to work out. I like that mindset, but it's the polar opposite now is everybody gets after it. You take a couple weeks off and it's like, now is my opportunity to build and get better and set myself up for next season. So everybody starts getting after it now in November. And that's why you see so many guys throwing 98 versus it used to be 92, 93, because guys come into camp ready to go and they've put some serious work in the off season and it's something they're excited about versus hunting or fishing or chilling and actually enjoying your off season.
Spencer Strider was asked today about time off. How much time did he take off? And he goes, well, what do you call time off? He goes, not much. In other words, he was back doing shit, within a week. Not necessarily throwing, but doing all the other stuff to get ready.
It used to be the trainer told you, like, when the season ends, don't move for a month. Watch movies, enjoy your family, go have good dinners, chill out. Don't do anything to your body for a month. And I think guys realize, like, sitting around for a month just makes – if you sit around for all of October or November, then December, January, you're spent catching up.
You're behind, yeah.
You don't have a chance to build.
And also there's this proliferation of these high-tech facilities. Everybody basically that lives, not even in a major city, there's some at smaller places too, have these labs and high-tech facilities that have all the biomechanics. Everybody has all of this stuff, access to everything that they didn't used to have unless you lived in, a handful of places. Now they're everywhere. Yep. And I talked to Max. He spent a lot of the offseason in Atlanta this year instead of going back to L.A. the whole time. He spent a lot of it in Atlanta, throwing at Maven over there where a bunch of the guys hit and throw on the west side in Atlanta. I said, man, I think every time you went to a Hawks game, they showed you they made sure everybody knew you were there. He said, yeah, I kind of noticed that. They take a picture of it. Hawks did and send it out every time.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like his personality, but I even saw a few of those videos.
He's a big basketball fan. He loves going.
Yeah.
If you folks have not gone to our site yet, you should do it. It's 755forever.com, 755forever.com. Click on store. You're going to see all this cool merch we got. It's good stuff. Mandy, our artist in residence, did some great stuff, designs, and T-shirts and slides and hoodies, and there's going to be more stuff on the way, too. I think we're going to have some hats pretty soon. So go in there and check it out. Really reasonably priced, by the way. So go look at that, and also, if you're interested in sponsoring, the reminder is to go to that same site, 755forever.com, and there's an email on there that you can email our guy, Tim, producer, and let us know. We're getting sponsorships going, and it's going to be pretty cool. You're going to want to get on board. If you want to be a title sponsor, be up front. We're going to give you some good plugs here along the way as this thing heats up, because we already got a lot of listeners. It's doing really well so far, so thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. What was this time for you like? Is it different when you're with a new team, obviously, than when you come in when you've been with the same team 2 or 3 years? How much different is that for when you come into a new team? Is it like the first day of school where you go in there and I guess your personality kind of, for some guys, it's a lot easier than others, I'm sure, right? If you're kind of an introvert or you're not real talkative, it's probably pretty rough going into a clubhouse first day, right? And I guess it makes a difference on how good the guys are. These guys seem really welcoming to me. And I could see some clubhouses would not be like that.
No, I was shocked when I came over to Atlanta from Seattle how, Tim Hudson's coming over saying hi to me. B-Mac, Brian McCann's coming over saying hi to me. So many guys that could be pretty douchey, if they wanted to. They could get away with a lot of you're below me type of behavior toward, rookies and stuff. And everybody was cool. That makes a huge difference. But when you go to a new team, it's like you have to figure out the vibe and what plays and what everybody expects of you. I came over with a 20 ERA from Seattle getting released. I didn't speak. I just stayed out of everybody's way. But you watch the guys that have an established career. Maybe they've interacted with the players. You've seen them at all-star games. These guys with 5-10 years. If you traded for Matt Olson, everybody knows what he can do. So he's got everybody's respect. Guys are going to go out of their way and make him comfortable. But you still have to figure out kind of what the vibe is in the clubhouse, where everything is, which guys you want to kind of pal up with, which guys you want to stay away from. And it always shocks you. Even if you watch guys' interviews and you think you have a feel for somebody's personality, they can be totally different off camera, in the clubhouse. It can shock you. So you have to go through this process of which guys you want to, when you walk in to grab breakfast, what table do I want to sit at? And you'll sit at one, you'll be like, I'm never sitting with that guy again. And there's other guys like, man, I didn't know this guy was so cool. He seemed like this, when I saw his interviews. The next time when you come back and the team, it's just like a family reunion. You throw your stuff in your locker, give everybody big high fives and hugs, and you get to work. So it's definitely easier every year when you know guys. And then even when I went from Atlanta to Oakland, I had to start all over. It shocked me that my tenure meant nothing in that clubhouse because nobody had any. There was like Coco Crisp had a lot of time, but nobody else really had any. So it wasn't exactly valued in that clubhouse. So it was like I had to kind of morph into, all right, how do I vibe with these guys? What matters to them? Is it video games or that kind of things? There's always that process of feeling it out that it's so nice when it's not there when you already know everybody.
I mean, it's so obvious to me that it seems like to be a good GM, you would understand the importance of vetting players and building chemistry. But I don't think some GMs put nearly the priority on that, where they take talent first of all, because, I mean, you got to have talent first and foremost. But they judge talent and they're willing to take some real douches. And you can get by with having one of those, whatever. Because sometimes you'll bring a guy like that in, a real ass, and you bring him in, and he cannot be an ass if there's just one of them and it's surrounded by a bunch of good dudes. He will assimilate, and he will know that I can't just be a jerk if I'm the only guy. But you can't bring in 2 or 3 of those guys.
Right.
Because then you're going to have a clique of them against them. And then when things go south and you have a losing streak, you start the season 1-10 or whatever. Good luck.
But maybe that douche is having a good year.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's going well for him. It can get ugly. You could have a lot of guys that are kind of on the fence, and you bring in one bad influence and they kind of like, this guy's talking crap about the manager. This guy doesn't like the pitching coach, and you see them kind of gravitate toward that energy, and it's bad for a clubhouse. But when you have, 23 out of 25 solid dudes, it's hard to overpower that with one bad personality.
Yeah, and I just think it makes spring training and starting the season strong so much easier to do when they come in and they're from day one, they're comfortable. So they can just focus on working out and not about, okay, is this guy cool? Can I do this and do that? And young guys allowed to sit on this couch? There's none of that here. And I just think it makes a huge difference. I've mentioned this a couple of times, and I don't mean to bang on Matt Kemp, because Matt Kemp had a great career and he was a hell of a player. But he was at the stage of his career where when Alex came over from the Dodgers, Alex known him from the past. And when Alex came in, the first thing he did within a few weeks of getting the GM job was trade Matt Kemp. Because Alex understood that's not the fit we need for this clubhouse. Matt Kemp at this stage of his career, he had heard some of the things, from the past. I mean, you didn't need a guy that, for instance, when Ron Washington puts his affirmations, his printed out affirmations in the locker stalls of every player before the start of every series. And at one point he did it every day in spring training.
Every day, yeah.
But you can't have a guy that'll come in and pick that up, scoff, laugh at it, rip it up and throw it away. You can't have a guy, the little announcements they put in your lockers that say, we need you guys to be at this place tonight for this team function to be it. Can't have a guy look at that and throw it in the trash, because you cannot have the highest paid guy, the guy with the most all-star appearances and all that, setting the tone for all these very impressionable young players that come up and go, well, that guy's making $25 million a year. If he can be like that, I can do whatever the hell I want to. You want guys setting the tone who are guys like Ozzie Albies and Matt Olson and Austin Riley that are just all positive and doing exactly, they're on, completely buy into what they're doing here, to what the manager's doing, what coaches like, love Ron Washington, love all that stuff he's doing, appreciate it rather than scoff at it. It's important. And Alex has set the tone from the day he got here. Now we're 7 years in, and it's just been so important to the Braves' success. I mean, first and foremost, you got to have the players, but that's important stuff.
I don't know what Matt was like in LA, and it might just speak to how hard it is to shake a reputation in the game. He might have done a few things, but I actually really liked him.
Players liked him too.
I had some expectations of him just being that big of a deal in LA and dating Rihanna and doing all these things, but I got along with him great. He was cool to my kid.
He was a young guy at that point.
Super generous, getting the boys out. I think though, that's another reason they had a lot of drama early when he was with the Dodgers, like with him and Ethier and the older players and getting along. That. And he was cool for me when he came to Atlanta. I liked him a lot.
Yeah, I don't think he had a problem with the veteran players, the veteran players. No. And all that. He was funny, Great personality.
Yeah. Oh, he's great.
I just think it's that little stuff that I was talking about that Alex knew can't be our bellwether, our bell cow guy. The guy needs to be the Freddie Freeman, you know?
Yeah.
Or Ozzy with the Latin guys. It needs to be the guys that the other guys, they fall in line and don't question the little things that they do. It's all part of the bigger picture. And at that point, was not a great player either. He was solid still. It's not worth the baggage.
Right. And that might be why he was so much cooler, you know, because he was struggling and you start to get humbled in the game. And it's like, all right, you change your tone. I was eating with some dudes the other day and they were asking me, you know, like, how hard is it to stay humble? And, you know, I just started giving them examples. I'm like, man, if you've been through a point in your life where I'm walking out of Citi Field and people are booing me and my kid as we go to the parking lot, or you're getting booed off of fields, or I think I told you about this. I had this autograph signing I filled in for JJ Putz and I got paid, but I went to the Bellevue Square Mall and I sat at this table for 4 hours and signed maybe 3 autographs. I mean, they were going out into the concourse asking people like, hey, you want a Mariners player's autograph? And they kind of stop and look at me and just, no, I don't want that guy's autograph, and keep walking. And it was like that on repeat. One guy came into the store and asked me where he could get a hat or what. And he thought I just worked there. And I was like, I don't know. I don't work here, but I'll sign your hat if you buy it. He goes, I don't want you to sign it. You know, so you go through experiences like that, start getting your ass kicked in the game and losing sleep at night. I mean, it's really easy to stay humble. So I think he was probably at that point in his career where things weren't going his way and he was different. But yeah, it's yeah,
he'd been hurt, gained weight, got ridiculed for gaining weight and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, he's probably like, you know,
game beats you up.
Yeah. Anyway. Alex was asked again about Max Fried today and the contract status. And, of course, he didn't say anything about it because they never do. They keep everything ultra private. But he really appreciated – he saw Max Fried's comments to us when we asked him at Braves Fest about where things stand contract-wise. He's entering his last year. He'd settled, you know, arbitrations within $15 million or whatever it is. And Max said –
the Braves do things a certain way, and I know that privacy and more having that just kind of be more behind closed doors is the way things are done. So I'm gonna respect that.
And he was very respectful about it. He didn't roll his eyes or say, you know.
Right.
And Alex said, and I didn't sit down and talk to him and go, no, I didn't say, let's say this. And that was just Max saying what he wanted to say. He said, he's been here. He knows how we do things. And that was just him being Max. That's Max being honest and being a guy that knows how things are run here.
I love the fact that he said, hey, I understand how the organization likes to do things, that they're private. I never sat him down and told him that. He just knows. He's been around.
I think it's kind of another example, though, of if you didn't have the vibe you have, you didn't have every guys buying in, a guy might be better in that situation. He's watching all these other guys get extensions long before, some of them before they even get to arbitration, some of them before they even get a year of service in. And here's a guy that's been, you know, a perennial guy in top 5 Cy Young recently. He's got like one of the lowest ERAs in baseball in the last 3 seasons. I mean, this is a guy that's, you know, and a guy that's like 30 years old. If he was a little testy or he was a little upset, nobody would blame him for it. But he has shown nothing like that at all, which is pretty good. Yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate professionalism that he's shown through what could be an awkward situation with your ace pitcher when he's surrounded by a lot of guys that are set for life.
Well, I think everybody saw what happened with Freddie, you know, and the last thing you want to do is have what a great, you know, career that Max has had in his time with the Braves. The last thing you want to do is have it go sour or leave a bad taste in your mouth. You want to look back at this as like the greatest years of your career. And it only takes one comment, you know, one thing that kind of hints at bitterness can kind of spin and turn into a story and get repeated, and you can get grilled on it and have to expand on it. But once that comment's out there, people are like, we know how he feels, and they're mad at the GM or they're saying he's selfish. It's so easy for something like this that's just strictly business to turn into a story. And it's the last thing you want for your teammates to have to answer questions about it. The whole deal is it's pretty sensitive.
I tell you what, it also made me think, and I know all signs point otherwise, and I might be naive to think this, but I still think for some reason, when I listen to Alex, when I see Alex, the look in his face, and when I see the look in Max's face when they talk about this, I still think there's a chance that he's going to sign an extension here. I know it's really unusual situation. Most of the guys that get this far don't do it. He's from California and all that. But I think the fact that he was here most of the winter working out with his teammates, that he showed no signs whatsoever of being frustrated or bitter or anything. And Alex the same way. He's not, when we ask him about it, he understands. He talks about how great Max is. You want to keep your guys that are great players. I just think against all odds, I know as far as what's happened in the past with guys in this situation, I still think there's a chance he signs, a pretty good chance that he signs an extension here. I really do.
Well, that'd be awesome. Yeah, you never know. And that's part of them nothing gets leaked.
Right.
No numbers, no rumors, nothing really. It's the nice thing about it is they could be pretty close and you wouldn't even know until it was there. But I'd love to see him sign him back. Wearing that same jersey, such a big deal.
And you know the $22 million we've talked about how that's been the ceiling so far. But Ken Rosenthal wrote a really good story about how there's hardly any Boras clients anymore. There's 2 with the Dodgers and Braves, the 2 most successful teams in the NL. 2 with the Dodgers now. Used to be quite a few, and none with the Braves. And Ken wrote how those 2 teams, the Braves in particular, do things their own way. And both Alex and Friedman said, no, we'll work with Scott. We'll draft Scott's clients or whatever. There's no edict that they won't. It's just that the Braves have never gone in for the highest price free agents and paid the exorbitant. They won't overpay for free agents. They do things on their terms. And now that they've got all these guys signed long-term, they can do that. They don't have to go out and get, Blake Snell. They do things on their terms, and they won't overpay for a guy. But as Kenny pointed out, they haven't gone over $22 million with any of these guys, but they would have gone well over that if Freddie would have taken that offer. Freddie had turned down their 5-year offer because he wanted $6 million, and he ends up getting less, especially with the deferred money with the Dodgers, than he would have got annually with the Braves. But it would have been way over 22. And Aaronola, if Aaronola would have taken the Braves off for this winter, it would have been well over $22 million too, so closer to 30. So, in other words, that is not a hard ceiling whatsoever. And they know Max Fried is not going to sign for $22 million a year. But if you get up on 25, 27 a year, maybe he does that. We've talked about the injury history he has. Maybe he'd want 5 years at $25 million with the security of knowing if the blister comes up again, if this forearm thing ends up being worse than, a recurring thing. I've already had one TJ. That's why I think the fact that the $22 million is not a hard cap at all. And there's not one player in that clubhouse, not one, who would be at all offended if Max Fried got $25, $28 million a year. They would love to see him come back.
No, and that's been with extensions, right?
Yeah, that's all the extensions. None of those was a guy at free agency.
Mm-hmm.
It was a guy like Olson was a year from free agency. He signed a really club-friendly deal. But most of the others were 2, 3 more years. I mean, Harris he didn't even have a year of service time. Strider had a year of service time. So a lot of them were way, way from anywhere close to free agency. Ralston Riley, same way. All those guys. The only one that was even close was Olson.
If you're in Max's shoes, it's like you get this close, you kind of want to see what's out there. But if you go out there and the Braves are $3 million lighter, per season than, say, the Dodgers or some other team that you're looking at, that's where I think you can kind of get the discount. But it's also like if you're Max, and I would want to avoid putting myself in a position where I pull a hammy in July.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to rush it back.
Yeah.
And then you wind up injured.
If the same thing happens as happened last year, I mean, it's not a stretch to say we just saw it last year. He only made 15 starts. He missed half the season. If that were to happen, he'd have to settle probably for a 1 or 2 year deal to reestablish himself, with some opt-outs and all that complicated stuff and all that. If you can get a 5-year deal at age 30, that's the other thing, is he's going to be 30. So there's not going to be some teams willing to go, like they might with Garrett Cole or whatever, when he's had the injury history he's had. So if he was 26, 27, I'd say probably not a chance. He's going to free agency. He's going to get a huge deal, well over $200 million. But at 30, coming off the injuries he's had, I think there's a chance. I really do. I know not many people think there's any chance, but I really do think there's a pretty good chance that he signs an extension. Also, Charlie's going to be off the books next year. He hasn't said it, but this is going to be like Charlie's last year. He's 40, came back one more year on the option, $20 million. There's not another option on that contract. I can't see the Braves extending him again, especially not anywhere near that amount of money. So Charlie's coming off the books. Sale, you got to see what he's going to do. He's under contract for 2 years, but you got to see if he can stay healthy. So they might want that certainty with Max Fried, instead of just being able to count on, Strider as your only guy that you can count on being an ace next year.
Yeah, and it's hard, too, because the Braves do have quite a bit of depth. It's not like we have 2 good starters.
Right. You got these young guys coming up, but you know what that is. There's no certainty whatsoever there that one of them's not going to have Tommy John tomorrow. Yeah. Look at Huascar Noah when he was breaking in. Look at Ian Anderson when you thought he's established now. What's happened there? Look at Soroka. Look at Kyle Wright. Led the majors in wins. He might never pitch again. We don't know. God, I hope he does, but we don't know with the shoulder. They're a pitch away, as you know better than anybody. Guys are a pitch away from being the outlook completely changed.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I mean, it's as a pitcher, I would be a lot more likely in Max's shoes to take that security than a position player because there's not a lot of injuries that position players endure that it's a wrap. But pitchers, if Max had a second Tommy John or something like that, I mean, everything changes if you have that second surgery.
Hardly anybody's been an elite pitcher again after 2 TJs. Few have, but not many. So there's a good vibe. It's a start of spring training. Of course, there's a good vibe. You got a 6-time division champion, but you got that thing hanging over them, 2 division losses. So there's going to be people that question them. It doesn't matter how good they are during the season until they advance again. It's what have you done for me lately? People forget they won the World Series in 2021, But all everybody is obsessed with it and it also, like Strider said, the fact that it was the same team you lost to both times, that made it even a little more difficult. Your division rival. You realize the Phillies were exactly 14 games behind the Braves each of those 2 years? 14 games behind them in the standings.
Yeah, and I don't even know how you approach, what the ideal mindset is as a team because they've beat them during the regular season both years too.
They were good games.
Yeah.
It wasn't a one-sided thing at all. But yeah, you handled them. And last year, you clinched the division by going up to Philly in the biggest series of the year. And they played great up there in that same rabid atmosphere that we saw in the postseason. It was almost as loud for that regular season series when we were there. It was pretty close. And they won that series. So we've talked about it. It's not excuse making the point. There's some really weird stuff that's happened with their pitching that really undermined them. There's no excuse for the offense other than they had that break and they got to figure out how to stay sharp. But, to lead the majors and tie the Major League home run record last year, lead the majors in virtually every offensive category last year. And then you get 4 extra base hits and score 8 runs in 4 games in a postseason series. But I think Alex took the right tact in going out and getting this pitching staff because they have so much depth now. That bullpen, the fact that you could even talk about pitching Lopez in a rotation when you've got as many starters as you do tells you how good that bullpen is, that you're not going, okay, he's our backup closer.
That might prove to be the most important aspect is just having arm after arm after arm you can run out of that pen.
I think it is. Because they can afford to lose like 2 guys to injuries, and you still got a great bullpen. If Iglesias starts the year on the IL like he did last year, they're not going to be in the same boat that they were in last year because you got 3 or 4 guys that can close those games and legitimately. I mean, last year that was like, whoa, he missed the first 6 weeks of the season, and they overcame it. But this year, they had to stress that bullpen last year, and they were on fumes at the end of the year.
Yeah, and that's not a position you want to be in. And when the Phillies bring in those guys throwing 100 miles an hour in those big situations, it's like you can want it as bad as you want as a hitter, but 100's 100, and it's going to be tough to square up. Something's going to have to bounce your way. The Braves are going to have guys like that they can bring in, and that could be the difference. I mean, it's just tough. It's tough looking at this whole season and being like, none of it really seems to matter that much until you get to the postseason, and then you got to have that sense of urgency and figure out how you get over this hurdle. But you got to play 162 first before it matters.
Right. 6 months before it even matters. But yeah, I think the lefty situation is really is such a crucial factor because Mentor last year, there were times when he was the only lefty to go to.
Yeah.
So he had to come in every big situation they needed him. This year, they've got 4. They've got 5 counting Dylan Lee. Dylan Lee might not even be only open at a roster. They got so many guys, but Aaron Bummer, that's a huge ad because he can be that guy to come in and get that ground ball double play that Mentor had to do before. You got this Kerr dude. He's got great stuff from San Diego. I mean, they got some lefties, man.
I mean, if you could go into the postseason with Mentor only throwing 55 to 60 games.
Instead of 80.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Those outings pile up, even if it's in early May or early June, and you have to go 5 out of 8 or something like that. It's however many times you wind up having to do that, or you're supposed to have a day off, but we needed you for 1 out. Now you're kind of set back. Postseason rolls around and you feel good. It's a totally different game than even if you have the adrenaline running on fumes, man, like you saw with Elder, you can't fake it.
Yeah. And that pen with Alex talking about today, how he went into the offseason just determined not to be in a situation like he was in when he had to go out and get 3 guys, Melanson and those guys at the trade deadline. And then in 2021, He said that was the year that taught him, I can't be in that situation again, because they were coming off 2020 when they lost in the LCS in Game 7 to the Dodgers. And he, in his head, said, okay, I'm aiming for postseason. What can we do to get ready? And he looked past the regular season and he wasn't ready. They had a couple of injuries, and he had to go out and get 4 outfielders in July. They made it work. They went out and got Jacques and Soler and Duvall, whatever, and they made it work. But he said he doesn't want to be in that situation again where he's scrambling, where they're under 500, past the All-Star break. And so that's why he went out. And you can do that also when you got all these guys signed long-term at all these other positions. You don't have to
That's
fill
what I was
holes.
going to say.
You can focus on your bullpen and your starting rotation and getting unbelievable amounts of depth. It just changes everything, I think, when you're not running guys out there and crossing your fingers and hoping they're ready to make a start, I mean, Winans, God bless him, he stepped in a couple and made a couple starts. One of them went really well. The dude that started in Colorado, these guys stepped in and stepped up, but you were crossing your fingers, and then you had to bring them back and make another start, and it might have got lit up. You don't want to be in that spot again where they used 30 pitchers last year. Like 13 starters, some openers. You don't want to be in that boat, and they should not be in it with this team at all.
Another thing you've brought up is the move of bringing a guy like Jock in, and I think Sale probably fits that mold, but that's kind of more where the team's at, where it's like, what can we do to get an edge personality-wise and urgency-wise? I don't think there's any possible way after 2 years in a row of that same result, though, and I'm not going to say that. I'm not saying they took the Phillies lightly last year either, but there's no way you can let it happen 3 years in a row. I'll say that. Like that, you have to have this mindset of like, this is our World Series right here. And who knows, if they'd gotten past them in the last 2 years, they might have rolled through everybody else.
Yeah. And a guy that I haven't even mentioned, I always forget because he wasn't here last year, Tyler Matzik. You talk about edge. That postseason, that World Series run, he was a hero, man, and he had the edge. So I think adding him and Sale and Kelenic, I think if Kelenic gets off to a great start, he's that kind of guy that's got that swagger and all that. I don't think he's going to assert himself here like he did there, personality-wise, but he's confident, man. That guy, he'll talk. But, yeah, I don't think this team is going to have to worry about being flat. Sale's not going to allow it himself. As long as he's healthy and on that team, he's not going to allow those guys to fall into any kind of a flat, like, woe is us, situation or whatever. That was a great ad for the personality. As long as he can just stay healthy, and they're going to be really careful with him. They're going to make sure that he, whenever he needs a little rest, if he's a little sore, if he gets some 20 starts during the regular season, they'll be totally happy with that as long as he's ready for the postseason. That's all they need because they've got enough depth. They can bring guys up. It'll basically be a 6-man rotation without calling it one. And they can skip like his turn. You don't want to skip Strider and Fried, but you're going to give them extra rest too. Those guys made more starts last year on 5 days rest than they made on 4 days rest. And especially with this bullpen, you're not going to have to rely on them so much to go 7, 8 innings, 6, 7, 8 innings. If a guy have to come out in 4, you got enough bullpen arms, you can do it now and get by, Yeah,
and just having that depth of, hey, Max has had a great start. He's at 80 pitches in the 6th. We're up 9-0. Yeah. Get him out of there.
Yeah. Alex also talked about the only spots you've got even open, because this team's set except for the back of the bench, and the 5th starter. That's it. And the last bench spots, Guillermo is going to be their main utility guy. Guillaume from the Mets. Solid. Looks good. It's in shape. I know he gained a little weight with the Mets, I think. He's in good shape. He's a solid utility guy. One of the last bench spots is going to be a speed guy because it'll be Wall or White. I would think White. And then you have to decide, I think you're going to have an extra infielder like Fletcher. You're paying him $5 million anyway, be at AAA. I think it's probably not going to happen, but what happens if you lose, if you get just dinged up in a game, you have your shortstop and your second baseman get dinged up in a game. You can move Riley over to short, move Olson. Either way, you need another infielder because you don't have the kind of guys like a Culberson when he was at his best could play infield or outfield, or I forget, Swords guy, Swords with the pink swords. I can't even think of his name. He could play the infield and the outfield, but you don't have a guy like that right now.
You need one of those.
Yeah.
That's why Prado was so perfect.
They're going to have to probably carry an extra infielder because what happens if you do lose both your middle infielders in a game? The next day you can bring somebody up, but you're not going to get through a game. And you're paying Fletcher $5 million anyway. So maybe you keep him and Guillaume. And if Fletcher, like Culberson last year, never gets off the bench, so what? You're not worried
guys
about
get banged up. Guys have little 2-day things like a tight hammy that you don't want to push. Ozzie gets a lot of physical injuries, like a bone gets hit.
Right.
Or crashes into something. He plays so hard.
But the point is, with a guy like him or in the outfield, you're going to have Wall or White. Those guys aren't going to play unless somebody gets hurt because their outfielders play every day too. They're going to. Oh, he also said today they're going to give Kelenic play him every day, at least to start, because they think it's valuable for him. He's 24. They don't think it would help him to platoon at all right now. They want him to know he's in. And as they pointed out, Harris struggled like crazy early in the season. And what did he do after that? Caught fire, and he was great the rest of the year. They think that no problem if Kelenic were to struggle early, but they think getting every day at bats is the best thing for him right now, and he might really bloom for that. I agree with him.
Knowing he's not going to get sent down or benched, you remember Kelly Johnson's story about when he came up and went 0 for whatever, and Bobby said, you're still in there every day.
1 for 40 or something, yeah, and then he caught fire.
It's such a difference. You strike out in your first 2 at-bats, and you're like, now I have to get a hit or I might get sent down tomorrow versus like, it's no big deal. I'm going to keep being in this lineup. I think that's watching Kelenic the last few years. I think that's probably the biggest thing for him is just not riding that roller coaster and putting too much pressure on himself. And the best way to ease that is to tell him right now, hey, from day 1 of spring training, you are left fielder. You're playing every day. You're going to get your at-bats, get comfortable, and do your thing. You can't get a bigger vote of confidence.
And they don't have a guy that's an obvious platoon guy for him anyway. Because Alex pointed out, I asked him about I said, Alex, if you look at it on paper, your bench is not very strong. It's not the greatest bench. And he made a great point. He goes, it's hard when you're in a situation like with Snit, the way he uses his players every day. And he goes, and I'm fully on board with it. Alex said he's fully on board with how Snit plays those guys every day.
I think what's challenging for us, and we had this at the trade deadline last year, I remember talking to some of our players about this, when we were looking to add to the bench, there were a bunch of really good players that were out there. And for a bench role, because of the way Snit runs things, which I'm totally on board with, our guys play every day. So it's hard to have bench players that are going to be good clubhouse guys and accept their role. That Austin Riley's going to play every day, Matt Olson's going to play every day, and so on.
But you've got infielders and your outfielders who play every day.
Who wants to sign that? Yeah,
exactly. So you're not going to go out and get a top utility guy, and you tell him, how much am I going to play? Well, probably not much. I mean, you're never going to play unless a guy's hurt or he's really slumping and they want to give him 1 day off. But you're not going to get regular bats. Like Pilar last year talked about it. He handled it really well, but he had times where he didn't play for a week, Yeah. Nicky Lopez was perfect for that. But, his arbitration salary kind of got too high for him and they needed,
The only situation you'd fall into is like, if Kelenic fell on his face and he's hitting, 155 through
but that's not
middle of May, and you're like, no, but that's the only time where you'd really want that utility guy. If he does all right, why would you sign with a team that you need an injury to even get on the field?
Right. I mean, if the worst came to worst and you got the midseason and he was still slumping, you could make a trade, do something. Yeah. But they've got a lot of confidence in the guy. They're putting a lot of faith in him. They ate, however many millions, $15, $17 million or whatever it was to get 5 years of control with Kelenic. That's how much they believe in him. And if you watch
talent in the world,
there's no reason why in this environment with these guys around him, there's no reason why he should be not realize his potential. I mean, he showed it last year. It wasn't like he had a great 10 games. He had 45 games where he was an animal, a stud at the start of the year. So, and this year, like we've talked about, he's going to be batting in the bottom third of the order. It's going to be no pressure on the guy.
It's the best possible landing spot for him.
So we'll see. But Alex made a good point, though. But people that want him to go out and get this player or that player, you're not going to go out and get this good utility infielder if he's never going to play. The guy knows that Braves play every day unless they're hurt.
Yeah, I've never thought of that. That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, you got Pilar at the end of his career, and you had Rosario in left field, so there was a good chance he was going to get the platoon. He knew that, which he did. Yeah, the Harris hurt during spring training, and he was so young too, but those guys are not coming out of the lineup right now.
That's another thing you got to respect about Alex, too, is he probably would tell players that when they started talking, like, hey, our left fielder's playing every day. There's not going to be this opportunity here. And a lot of GMs would kind of lead you on and get you in camp, on a minor league deal or something like that. And then you're just sitting the bench all year, like, kind of feel like you got lied to.
And a lot of GMs would also tell Snit, we're getting this guy, you're going to need to play him once a week or once every 3 or 4 days. Not Alex. He made it clear again today. Every time he talked about the bench or playing this guy or the plan with Kelenic, every time he said it, he made sure he said, That's ultimately, Snit's going to make that decision. But there's not many GMs that say that, especially in this day and age, that go out of their way to make sure everybody knows the manager makes the lineup here. I don't.
Yeah.
He's got a great relationship with Snit. And for a GM in this day and age with analytics and everybody platooning, or at least for him not to tell Snit, we're not playing Matt Olson every day this year. We're not wearing him down. But it's not what he's told him. He said, I'm fully on board with the way Snit uses these guys.
I remember being with a team and a certain player was hitting about 750 off of a lefty, but he was a lefty too, but it was just his guy. And he went into the manager's office and explained the whole thing. And the manager just said, I mean, it's coming from up top. So he's like, bring the GM down here, talk with the GM. And they just said, our book says it's a bad matchup. You're not playing. And that guy was like, I think I'm going to retire. And I think he did.
And that's not the way. That's another one of the great parts of the chemistry here is that relationship the GM has with the manager is so opposite of what it was before when Snit had just taken over and John Hart in copy, but it was John Hart mainly that, came down and ripped him a new one for using a certain reliever. That doesn't happen with Alex. And Snit was so ready he was furious a couple of times. He was ready to, it's not worth it. When those guys belittled him and treated him like that, when Markakis was ready to beat up John Hart.
I love that story. Nick's so quiet.
Send that up the ladder. If he ever comes down here and chews out my manager again, I'm punching him in the face.
That's why everybody loved him.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll have a lot more to talk about the next time we do it. Position guys are going to be, most of them are here already, but next week, when they get here Tuesday, when the full workouts start, that's when the fun starts because you have live BPs from day one. You're going to have guys throwing live BPs, so that's when it's going to be fun. But we'll have plenty to talk about between now and then, or when we do this again next week. And we appreciate you guys being on board with us. And like I said, go to that site, check out the merch, see if you see anything you like, and we'll have some more coming along the way. And if you're interested in sponsoring it or you know somebody that might, let us know. Keep us on the air. All right, we appreciate it. 755 forever. We are out. Thank you.
So if you're looking for some bad news, we can find it somewhere else. Last year was a son of a